our fishing industry is at risk as well.
Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I just want to pick up where my colleague, the Honourable Ruth Dyson, our excellent conservation spokesperson, left off, because the Minister for Conservation has also christened herself, I think, the Minister for Looking. Just looking, because that's what Kate Wilkinson told a select committee when people raised concerns about whether it was a good idea for this government to go on a search of World Heritage sites for mining opportunities. And Kate Wilkinson said, nothing to do with me, I'm just the Minister for Looking. I'm not the Minister responsible for the drilling or the digging, I'm just the Minister for Looking. What I'd like the Minister of Conservation to be is the Minister for Doing. I would like the Minister of Conservation to actually get out there and do something to protect the conservation estate. I'd like the Minister of Conservation to actually get out there and do something about threatened species. But instead, all we've seen, Mr Chair, from this Minister of Conservation and conservation under this government is funding cuts. No sense of the value of the conservation estate to New Zealand, no sense of its intrinsic value to New Zealand and New Zealanders, and no sense of its real economic value. And the numbers tell a story, Mr Chair. In the 2009 budget, $54 million taken out of the conservation budget, and that has its impact year on year on year. But then we come to this year's budget with a further $11 million taken out of the conservation budget. A further $11 million that the Department of Conservation has to find, has to cut from the services that are being provided to New Zealand and to our conservation estate. But there's good news coming for the Department of Conservation. Next year they only get an $8.7 million cut. So there we go. The government in its generosity says, no, next year it'll just be $8.7 million more dollars that the Department of Conservation has to cut. And we've been told time and again by this government that these cuts are back office cuts. Nothing will be happening on the front line. Well, let's look out where staffing cuts have come from in the Department of Conservation. And as part of the $54 million reduction in that first 2009 budget, 21 staff cut in Nelson, 18 staff cut in the Waikato, 12 staff cut in Wanganui, around 12 to 15 staff cut in Southland. These are the people at the front line of conservation in New Zealand. These are the people losing their jobs under the National Party. This is not some back office cut. These are not some services that New Zealanders won't see. These are the people in our regions who are doing the work that New Zealanders know is important, that tourists see every day and say, isn't that tremendous that you've got that Department of Conservation that's looking after what makes New Zealand beautiful. They're the people in our regions. It's those jobs that are going, Mr Chair. That's what this budget has done. It's continued on National's cuts to a vital public service agency, the Department of Conservation, not in some back office in Wellington, but out there in the regions of New Zealand. And Mr Chair, part of those cuts were to scientists. There's not much more front line for the Department of Conservation than the science that they do. And hundreds of scientists wrote to this government and said, and I quote, recessions come and go, but extinction is forever. Extinction is forever. Only around 200 of the 2,700 threatened species in this country are actually currently being monitored by DOC, and that goes down every year. Ruth Dyson's already mentioned what's happening with possum control. DOC is now only able to look at 1.2 million of the 8.5 million hectares it covers for possum control. This government is hamstringing DOC from doing its core functions, and it's hiding that under the rhetoric of saying we're going to cut back on bureaucracy. Nothing about that statement is true. All that we see in front of us are cuts to the services that DOC provides, and New Zealanders will be worse off as a result. We'll be worse off in terms of the environment that we live in terms of the biodiversity of this country, and we will actually be worse off in terms of our tourism. But then it goes to the most ludicrous extent, because now the so-called partnerships that DOC is undertaking are being forced on them because they don't have the money to do their core business. They're privatising looking after the Kiwi. What's more New Zealand than looking after the Kiwi, and yet that's now been privatised? This budget is letting down New Zealand when it comes to core conservation values and looking after our environment.
The question is that vote conservation stand part of the schedules. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary opinion, no. The ayes have it. The question is that vote food safety stand